Confession has a unique power. It allows us to shed the weight of unspoken truths, to share pieces of ourselves with others, and to heal. For many, sharing their deepest emotions and experiences helps them make sense of their struggles and brings a sense of release. If you're moved by these stories and want more, don't forget to subscribe to Tears and Truth. Your support helps us bring these real, emotional journeys to life. Story begins. I never thought I would lose everything I knew, my family, my culture, and my identity, just because I followed my heart. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when I first laid eyes on him. I remember the soft hum of conversation at the coffee shop, the faint smell of freshly brewed coffee in the air, and then his smile. It wasn't a smile that made me feel uncomfortable or nervous, like the smiles of strangers I passed every day. No, this one felt like an invitation to a world of possibilities I never thought could exist for someone like me. That I had always been told that love, the right kind of love, would come when the time was right. But the time never seemed right, not in my family, not in my culture. My parents, strict and devout to their traditions, had always drilled it into me that marriage was sacred and that it must always align with our customs. Love was secondary. Pragmatic choices based on caste, religion, and status were what truly mattered. The only love I ever truly saw in my house was the kind dictated by duty. And then, there he was, Arif. He was unlike anyone I had ever met. He didn't follow all the same rules I had been taught. He was a mix of boldness and humility, confidence and kindness. He wasn't a part of my community, and certainly not from my culture. In fact, his background couldn't have been more different from mine. But it didn't matter. When we talked, when we laughed, when we shared stories about our lives, I felt something inside me awaken. A realization that I wasn't bound by the walls of my upbringing. At first, it was innocent. A friendship that blossomed into something more. But as my feelings grew stronger, I started to question everything. Could I really love someone like him? Could I marry someone who wasn't accepted in my family's world? I asked myself these questions again and again, but no answer ever felt quite right. Deep down, I knew what I wanted. But I also knew what I had been taught to believe, what my parents had instilled in me since childhood. It wasn't just the cultural differences. It was the way my family viewed the world. They believed that tradition was the foundation of our identity, and to challenge it was to lose everything. I could already imagine the disapproval in my mother's eyes, the disappointment in my father's voice, the way they would look at me as if I had betrayed them, as if I had betrayed everything they had worked so hard to build. But despite all that, I couldn't deny what I was feeling for Arif. Then came the moment I never thought would happen, the moment when I had to choose. The decision wasn't as simple as I had imagined. I could already feel the weight of my parents' expectations pressing down on me like a boulder, threatening to crush everything I had begun to feel. My family had always been a pillar of my life. My parents, my aunts and uncles, the extended family that we saw every weekend. It was all part of my world, the one I grew up in, the one I knew so well. But then there was Arif, who represented everything that my world wasn't. He was my escape, my excitement, my future. But he was also the source of my deepest fear. That I spent countless nights talking to myself, staring into the darkness of my room, trying to make sense of everything. What was more important, staying true to my family and my culture, or following a love that made me feel whole in a way I had never known before? Arif was gentle in his approach, never once pressuring me. He understood the internal battle I was facing, but he was also clear about what he wanted. I don't care where you come from or what your family thinks, he told me one night, his voice low but filled with sincerity. I care about you, about what we could build together. That's all that matters. But as comforting as his words were, the reality of our situation kept haunting me. My parents would never understand. They wouldn't see him for the kind-hearted, loving person he was. They would only see the differences, the religion, the caste, the community, and to them that was all that mattered. One day, I decided to test the waters. I brought up the idea of marrying outside our culture casually during a dinner with my family. I watched their faces carefully as I spoke, gauging their reactions, hoping maybe, just maybe, they would surprise me. My mother's eyes narrowed immediately. "What are you saying, Beta?" she asked, her voice tight. "We've raised you with values. You know how important it is to marry someone who shares our beliefs, our customs. Anything else is a risk, something you should never entertain." My father didn't speak at first, but I could feel the shift in the room. He was always calm and composed, but there was a coldness in the air that I couldn't ignore. Finally, he spoke, his words cutting through the silence. Your mother is right. This is not the way things are done. Don't even think about it. I could feel the weight of their disapproval wrapping around me like a noose. The conversation had ended before it even began. There was no room for negotiation, no space for compromise. In their eyes, what I had suggested was unthinkable. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't help but replay the words in my mind over and over. Don't even think about it. It echoed through my head like a warning that if I chose Ariv, I would lose everything that had ever been a part of me. But what if I didn't choose him? Would I regret it forever? Would I wake up one day, years from now, realizing that the love of my life had passed me by because I was too afraid to break free? I knew I had to make a choice, but the thought of facing my family's anger, their hurt, their betrayal, it was unbearable. It didn't take long for my internal struggle to manifest in other areas of my life. I started to feel torn between two worlds, the one I had been born into and the one I wanted to create for myself. The guilt weighed heavily on me every time I saw my parents' faces, every time I heard their loving voices encouraging me to stay true to the family. I knew they only wanted the best for me, but it felt suffocating. Their vision of the future for me seemed so different from the one I had begun to imagine with Ariv. It was one evening, while we were walking by the lake after dinner, that I finally told Ariv how much I was struggling. He had always been understanding, but the anxiety in my voice that night must have made him realize the depth of my internal turmoil. I don't know if I can do this, I confessed, my voice shaking. I want to be with you, Ariv, but every time I think about it, I feel like I'm betraying my family. I'm scared of losing them forever. I don't think I can handle their anger, their disappointment. I don't even know if I can live with myself if I do this. Ariv stopped walking, turning to face me. His eyes were filled with compassion, but there was also a sadness in them, like he too knew the inevitable. I understand, he said softly, but you can't let fear dictate your life, Asha. You can't let guilt hold you back from living the life you deserve. I'm not asking you to choose me over your family, but I want you to choose yourself, choose your happiness. You have to live for you, not for anyone else. His words hit me harder than I expected. The truth of them settled deep inside, making me realize how much of my life had been lived for other people. My parents, my extended family, society. In a way, I had always been trying to meet other people's expectations of who I should be, of what I should want. But was that the life I truly wanted? Was it worth it if I had to sacrifice my own happiness? That night, I spent hours thinking about what Ariv had said, the weight of his words pressing down on me. The next day, I knew what I had to do. It was the hardest thing I had ever decided, but I knew I couldn't live in this state of fear and confusion any longer. I had to tell my parents about Ariv. I had to face them, even if it meant losing them. But deep down, I knew that the true loss would be if I didn't stand up for myself. That evening, I sat down with my parents after dinner. My heart was racing, and I could feel the tension in my chest. They both looked at me expectantly, as if they knew something was coming. I opened my mouth, but the words felt stuck. I took a deep breath. Mom, Dad, I began. There's something I need to tell you. Someone very important to me. His name is Ariv, and I love him. The room went silent. My mother froze, her fork halfway to her mouth, while my father's face immediately darkened. You're not serious, are you? My father's voice was cold, like a warning. I am, I said, my voice trembling. I know this is not what you expected, but I love him, and I want to be with him. You're making a huge mistake, Asha, my father replied, his voice filled with disbelief. This is not the way things are done. This man, he is not from our culture. He is not our kind of person. We don't know him, we don't understand him, and we won't accept this. My mother's eyes were wide with shock, but there was something else there too. Hurt. How could you do this to us, Beta? She asked softly. We've always given you everything, and now you want to throw it all away for someone like him. The words stung, but I couldn't back down. Not now. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing to be happy, and I need your support. I need you to understand that this is my choice, my life, and it's not just about culture or tradition anymore. It's about love. My mother shook her head, tears beginning to well in her eyes. This isn't love, Asha. This is rebellion, and we can't accept it. I felt a lump form in my throat as I realized the full extent of their rejection. I had hoped, deep down, that they would see how much I loved Ariv, how much he meant to me. But instead, their eyes were filled with anger, disappointment, and confusion. They didn't understand. They couldn't. And in that moment, I knew that I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Whatever happened next, my relationship with my family would never be the same. The days that followed were some of the hardest I had ever lived through. My parents didn't speak to me for nearly a week. Every time I tried to reach out, every time I tried to explain how I felt, they turned away. Their silence louder than any words they could have said. It wasn't just the coldness of their silence that stung. It was the way I could feel their disappointment rip through me, like an invisible force pulling me further and further away from them. The woman who had once been my pillar of strength, my mother, couldn't even look at me without tears in her eyes. She would turn her face away when I entered the room, as though the sight of me was a reminder of everything I had destroyed. My father, stoic as always, refused to engage. Every time I tried to explain myself, his face remained unreadable, his eyes distant, as if I was a stranger he no longer recognized. The hardest part was knowing that no matter how much I tried, no matter how hard I fought for understanding, they were unwilling to listen. Their minds were made up. They saw my decision as betrayal, not just to them, but to everything that came before me. To my ancestors, to our traditions, to the very foundation of our lives. Ariv tried to comfort me, but even his soothing words couldn't fill the emptiness that had settled in my chest. Every time I looked at him, I saw the future we could have had, but I also saw the wreckage of my past, the wreckage of my family that I had left behind in pursuit of my happiness. "I wish they could see you the way I do," Ariv said one night, as we sat in his car, parked near the quiet lake where we had often walked together. "I wish they could understand what we have. But I know it's not easy for them. This isn't what they envisioned for you. I don't know if I can keep doing this," I said, the tears I had been holding back finally spilling over. "I don't know if I can live with the pain of losing my parents. The guilt is eating me alive, Ariv. I thought that love would be enough, but it's not. It's never enough when it comes to family." He reached out and gently took my hand. "Asha, you've done nothing wrong. Your love for them doesn't have to change. But you also deserve to live the life that makes you whole. They'll come around in time. You just need to give them space to process." But his words were only a faint comfort. I knew he was trying to help me see the bigger picture, to remind me that my happiness was important too. But the loss I felt was too great. The distance between me and my parents felt insurmountable. Every day, I would wait for a call, a text, some sign that they were ready to talk to me again. But it never came. A week turned into 2. 2 weeks turned into a month. And still, the silence continued. Then, one night, my phone rang. It was my mother. I hesitated before picking up. My heart raced, unsure of what to expect. Was this the beginning of reconciliation? Or was it another confrontation? Another harsh rejection? "Asha," my mother said, her voice trembling. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. I don't know how to say this, but I need you to understand. This has been so hard for us. We can't just accept this overnight. I'm not sure we ever will. But I also know that you're our daughter, and I can't just cut you out of my life completely." The lump in my throat grew larger. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't expected this. After everything, the silence, the anger, I never imagined she would reach out, much less say this. "I know you love him," she continued, "and I can see how much this means to you. But I want you to think about everything carefully. Your father and I, we want what's best for you. We want you to be happy, but we also want you to be true to our values. Can you see both sides of this?" "I see both sides, Mom," I whispered, wiping the tears from my eyes. "I really do, but I can't ignore my heart. I can't pretend like this isn't the life I want." There was a long pause, and for a moment I thought the call would end. But then she spoke again, her voice softer. "I don't know what will happen, Asha, but you need to know that no matter what, you are always our daughter. And we love you." Those words, "we love you," were a lifeline. They were not an acceptance of my choices, but they were a glimmer of hope. They were a bridge, albeit fragile, between my world and theirs. And in that moment I felt like maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. But it would take time. It would take patience. And I wasn't sure how much time I had before the weight of their disappointment broke me completely. I hung up the phone with a sense of bittersweet relief. I had hoped for reconciliation, for everything to be easier. But I also knew that things had irrevocably changed. My relationship with my family would never be the same. The rift was there now, and it wasn't something that could be erased overnight. Days turned into weeks, and as time passed, I began to realize something I had been avoiding for so long. The reality of living in between two worlds. It wasn't just about choosing Ariv anymore. It wasn't just about following my heart. It was about the weight of the decisions I had made and the consequences I would have to live with that. I spent more time with Ariv, but the joy of being with him had become overshadowed by a deep, aching emptiness. My family's rejection, while softened by my mother's tentative outreach, still lingered in my soul like an open wound. I could see Ariv's concern every time he looked at me. He had never asked me to choose between him and my family, but it was hard to ignore the way my grief pulled at me, even when I was with him. The love I had for him was real, but so was the love I had for my parents. In the quiet moments, when I wasn't busy being with Ariv, I would reflect on my childhood. I thought about all the sacrifices my parents had made for me, the dreams they had nurtured for me. They had wanted me to have a life that reflected our family's values. They had wanted me to marry someone who understood where I came from, who could carry forward our traditions, someone who was a part of the community. And in rejecting that, I had rejected everything they had hoped for me. I wondered if I was being selfish. Maybe I had taken the easy way out, choosing a love that was comfortable and passionate, but not practical, not the kind of love that would help me grow in the way my parents had always wanted. Ariv noticed the changes in me. He had always been patient and kind, but now his concern was palpable. Asha, you don't have to carry this alone. You don't have to feel torn between us. Your parents. They may not understand now, but I'll be here no matter what happens. His words were a balm, soothing the ache inside of me. But even his support couldn't erase the doubt that still clouded my mind. Then, one afternoon, I received a call from my father. My heart skipped a beat, the sound of his voice unfamiliar, hesitant. Asha, we need to talk. I almost didn't know how to respond. This was the first time in weeks that my father had called me, the first time he had reached out. I felt the rush of emotions, hope, fear, confusion, all at once. I'm listening, Dad, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We've been thinking about everything you said, he began slowly. And while we don't agree with your choice, we want you to be happy. We've raised you with love and values. But we can see that this is important to you. I held my breath. Was this an apology? An olive branch? Or just a concession to keep the peace? I don't know if we'll ever fully accept Ariv, my father continued, but we want to meet him. We want to understand him better. We want to see the man who has captured your heart. Tears welled up in my eyes. I didn't know if it was the relief of hearing this or the overwhelming emotion of everything finally coming together. My parents were still holding on to their traditions, but they were starting to make room for the person I had become. The next weekend, Ariv and I drove to my parents' house. The air was thick with anticipation, and I could feel my pulse racing in my chest as we pulled into the driveway. My heart was torn between excitement and dread. Would they still treat him like an outsider? Or would this meeting be the beginning of healing? When we walked into the living room, my mother was the first to speak. Her voice a little strained but warmer than I had expected. She looked at Ariv with a mix of curiosity and wariness, but the hard edge in her eyes had softened, just a little. Hello, Ariv, she said, her voice quiet but sincere. I'm glad you could join us. Ariv, ever the gentleman, smiled politely. Thank you, Auntie. It's an honor to meet you both. There was a long silence, filled only by the ticking of the clock on the wall. The tension was palpable, but it wasn't unbearable. I could see that both my parents were trying to make peace with what I had chosen. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild. My father cleared his throat. We may not understand all of this, he said, his voice rough. But you're our daughter, and no matter who you choose, that will never change. It wasn't the full acceptance I had hoped for, but it was something. It was a start. As the evening wore on, we talked. Slowly, tentatively, but we talked. My parents asked Arav questions about his upbringing, his family, his values. They listened as he spoke about his dreams for the future, his respect for tradition, his love for me. And in return, I shared my reasons for choosing him. It wasn't just about love. It was about finding someone who truly saw me, who accepted me for who I was, no matter the differences between us.it wasn't perfect. There were still moments of awkwardness, of hesitation, but I could feel the tension begin to ease. They were seeing Arav not as a stranger, but as the man who had become a part of my life. And that, in itself, was a victory. Later that night, as Arav and I drove back to his apartment, I sat quietly, reflecting on everything that had happened. I had lost a part of my family, yes, but I was beginning to rebuild. Love was never going to be a simple choice. It was always going to be complicated, especially when it came to breaking cultural barriers. But I had learned something crucial in this journey. The only way forward was through honesty, through love, and through the willingness to face the hardest truths. And though the road ahead would still be difficult, I knew now that my choice was the right one. For me, because no matter what happened, I would always choose love. I would always choose to be true to myself.